So hi all, can everybody hear me? Am I audible? Can you just put that in the chat window so that we can get started? Alright, so I think everybody can hear me well, so I'll just go ahead with the webinar. Okay, just give me a moment. So my name is Vignesh Ganeshan. So I'm a SharePoint consultant based out of Bangalore. Okay, so I'm the author of the blog site vigneshsharepointthoughts.com. So you might have seen a lot of my articles on on Facebook SharePoint groups, on LinkedIn, and I also write for SharePoint community and C# Corner. So I'm a Microsoft certified SharePoint consultant, and the main part of my job is to help my customers build their SharePoint environment. Okay, so I help them to build their SharePoint farm, and just in case if they are looking forward to move towards the cloud, right, I do some consultancy so that they get to understand what it takes to move a SharePoint farm from on-premises to cloud. So that's mainly a lot about me. And so as you can see on this slide, so in this session we'll be talking about the different types of SharePoint architectural models. All right, so let's get started actually. So the targeted audiences for this session would be SharePoint farm administrators, SharePoint developers, SharePoint architects, and for folks who are new to SharePoint. Okay, so there could be certain terminologies in this session which I'm using that may not make sense to the folks who are new to SharePoint. Okay, but I would urge you all to, once this session is done, go to internet and try to Google them and try to understand about the terminologies which I'm talking here. Okay. So these are the targeted audiences for this session, and moving on to the next slide. So this is what you could expect from this session. Okay, so this session is to understand about the different type of architectural models in SharePoint, and for you to understand it, it's very important that you understand your customer's business, right? Let's say you're the SharePoint professional or the SharePoint architect for your company, and you need to understand what the business is all about so that you get to choose the right model for your business or for your customers. Okay, so it's very important that you choose the right model for your business. So in this session I'll be talking about how to choose the right model and which is the right model for your customer or for your business. And yes, of course, we'll be talking about the requirements that are mandatory for all the architectural models. So let's say we are talking about on-premises version of SharePoint, then what is required for on-premises, right? So we are talking, when we are talking about SharePoint Online, then what is required for SharePoint Online? Okay, then we'll be talking about the things that you need to be mindful of in each model. Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Can hear you.
You can hear me, right?
Hello.
Hello, yes, who is this?
Yes, this is Ashok.
Okay. Vignesh is present in the screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but we are not able to hear you. Hello, Vignesh?
Yeah, one
Even
moment.
I'm not able to hear anything.
Just give me a moment. Yeah. So am I audible now, guys?
Alright, alright. Yes, 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 cool, cool.
All right. So I'll.
Everybody else can mute themselves.
So, all right.
Okay.
So I hope I'm.
Invite
So
participants like
okay. So now I hope I'm audible for everybody. Okay. All right. So I'll just start from the beginning. Yeah, because I think I was unmuted. All right. So so my name is Vignesh Ganeshan. So I'm a SharePoint consultant based out of Bangalore. I'm author for vigneshsharepointthoughts.com. So that is the blog site which I maintain for writing SharePoint articles related to SharePoint Online, Cloud, Azure, and all those kind of stuff. Okay, and I'm active blogger in C# Corner as well as on SharePoint community. And as you can see on the slide, this session is going to be on the different types of SharePoint architectural models. Okay, so moving on. So listed one, the SharePoint farm administrators, developers, and architects. So these are the main targeted audiences for this session. Okay, and it's just not limited to them. It's just not limited to SharePoint farm administrators or developers or architects. So folks who are new to SharePoint, let's say you joined a company and you've been assigned a project to learn SharePoint, or let's say you're a person who's learning SharePoint. So this session has some stuff for you as well. So I understand that there is going to be certain terminologies which I'm going to use in this session, which may not make sense to you because because it's specifically meant for folks who have been on the industry for quite some time. But you could just Google it once the session is over, or you could certainly reach out to me and I'll help you. So this is what you could expect from this session. Okay, so the main agenda of our session today is to understand the different types of architectural models in SharePoint. Okay, and to understand what is the right model for your business or for your customer. Okay, so for you to understand what is the right model, I think it's very vital to understand what your customer's business is all about. Okay, so unless and until you're not completely aware of what your customer's business is all about, then I don't think you could just go ahead and choose the right model. So let's say if you want to choose on-premises, does the customer's business, does it really need an on-premises environment? Or let's say you're talking about SharePoint Online, then you need to make sure that the customer is really looking for SharePoint Online. So you as a SharePoint professional, you should make sure that you're trying to understand what your customer's business is all about. And of course, we'll be talking about the requirements for each model. So let's say if I'm planning for a SharePoint premises farm, right? So what are the things that I need? So right from the hard software or all those kind of stuff. So we'll be talking in detail about that. And also we'll be talking about things that we need to be mindful of in each and every model. Okay, what are the things that we need to care about? What are the things that we need to pay attention to in each and every single model? And of course, this session is going to be focused a lot on SharePoint 2013 as well as on SharePoint 2016. Okay, I won't be focusing a lot on SharePoint 2010, and for folks who are still running SharePoint 2010 in your production environment, please be mindful that Microsoft has already announced that SharePoint 2010 is out of mainstream production support. So what this means is, it doesn't mean that you don't get any support from Microsoft. As of now, SharePoint 2010 is in extended support mode. Okay, the mainstream production support for SharePoint, it stopped on October 2015. You may not get much of hot fixes for SharePoint 2010. You may not get some enhancements, and when you're opening a support case for Microsoft, you can't expect them to give the maximum amount of support since the product is already out of mainstream production. Moving on, so this is the evolution of SharePoint. So how SharePoint evolved, so how SharePoint got into the picture, and because I remember my days when I started myself as a SharePoint consultant, so it was SharePoint 2010 everywhere. Okay, so the features of SharePoint 2010 was so phenomenal that it's not possible for anybody to not adapt SharePoint for their environment. So when I started, it was 2010, and later organizations started moving towards 2013 because of the rich user interface which was given by Microsoft, and then we had some cloud interaction in 2013 which was introduced. So SharePoint started from 2010 and it has come a long way till 2016. Okay, so this is our core agenda for today. So these are the 4 type of architectural models that you can have on SharePoint. Okay, so any implementation of SharePoint that you're doing for your business or for your customer, it has to fall within these 4 models. So the first one is SharePoint on-premises, and the next one is SharePoint Online, which is software as a service. It's a SaaS product, so it comes with the Office 365 suite. The next one is a mix of both, which we call as SharePoint Hybrid, which comes with both SharePoint on-premises as well as SharePoint Online. So SharePoint Hybrid, you get to enjoy the features of both SharePoint on-premises as well as SharePoint Online. And the last one is, it's my favorite one, it's SharePoint in IaaS. Okay, it's nothing but you're hosting your SharePoint environment. It could be either on an Azure hardware or on AWS or on Google Cloud platform. So let's jump into the details and let's take a look at what each model has for us. Okay, so SharePoint on premises, so this is the good old model of SharePoint which we've been doing around for years. So in this model, you would be installing SharePoint on your own data center. Okay, so you're the one who's going to install it, you're the one who's going to customize it, and you will be responsible of maintaining it, and you're the one who decides what happens to SharePoint, and you're the one who's going to patch it. So everything will be done by you, and you're in control of the complete SharePoint on-premises environment. Okay, so let's take an example of as SharePoint professionals, we all have this common practice of installing SharePoint in our laptop just to have a lab kind of environment. Of course, that is an on-premises kind of installation, right? Because the laptop is nothing but it is something within your own jurisdiction. So you are the one who are going to install on it. You're the one who's going to take control of it. And you're the one who decides on what patches you want to install on SharePoint, whether I want to patch my environment or whether it's okay for me to not patch my environment. If there is any new features which Microsoft introduced, do I really need to upgrade towards that? So you're in total control when you're running a SharePoint on-premises model. So this is an overview of what SharePoint on-premises model is all about. So as I just spoke a few minutes back, so it's the old traditional model which we all as SharePoint professionals, we have been doing this for quite some time. Okay, and the software for any SharePoint on-premises model, as you all know, you need to reach out to Microsoft, you need to understand how their licensing works, and you need to pay Microsoft for downloading SharePoint, the enterprise version as well as the standard version. And of course, you're the one who's gonna patch your environment, and you will be taking care of scaling up and scaling out. Okay, so let's say all of a sudden Microsoft released a cumulative update version. Okay, it's up to you whether you want to install it for your environment, or it's up to you if you don't want to do it. Let's say there is some rich functionalities in that CU and you think it is required for your business, right? Then you can certainly go ahead and install it, but it's totally up to you. And scaling up and scaling out, as I mean, this is a pretty common industry standard, right? Let's say you are in need of more servers, you're in need of more RAM, or you're in need of more extra resources or whatever. So it's totally in your control. You design it, and you are the one who's gonna prepare the governance plan as well as the information architecture. So for folks who don't understand what you mean by governance plan or information architecture is, so to put it in simple words, right? So let's say you implemented SharePoint for your customers, right? It is an enterprise content management platform, and a governance plan is nothing but it's a set of predefined policies. It's a set of predefined security policies which your customers have to comply with when they are using SharePoint. All right. So let's say you have some policy which says any user who needs access to a site collection, right? He has to reach out to the owner, get his approval, and only then we can give him the access to that site. Or let's say you have a plan which says that you have a security policy which says that users, my end user shouldn't go ahead and upload any exe file to my SharePoint site. So stuff like this, right? So some kind of security policies, some kind of security standards so that your environment is always intact. So those kind of things are called as governance plan. When it comes to information architecture, it's you as a SharePoint professional who decides where the content lives, right? So let's say if there is a SharePoint site, it's you who design like the documents. This is how a document library should look like. This is where the site should go. Like this is where the subsites are going to look like. Let's say you have a predefined template which you're rolling out for your customers, and you say, you know what? So this is, if you want to use a document library, it has to be here. If you want to have a subsite, that could be only certain number of subsites under a site collection, and you don't get to exceed that. So things like that are called as information architecture. Okay, and as I clearly highlighted in red below, right? And folks, this is a common mispractice which I'm seeing in the industry these days. Okay, so when this is not just within my team. Okay, so when I talk to my customers, when I talk to my end users, or when I even talk to my peers, right? They often keep representing SharePoint on premises as on premise. So if there is anything which you take out from this session today, which you learn for yourself, please understand that on premises and on premise are two different things altogether. Okay, they grammatically mean different. They are not the same thing. It's okay to say on premises as on prem, but it is definitely not okay to say on premises as on premise. So from now on, it is SharePoint on premises. So I hope you just pass this message to your peers. Okay. So understanding on premises version of SharePoint. So as I spoke about, when we talk about SharePoint, right, it is just not SharePoint as an application. Okay, so as we speak now about SharePoint, when you talk about SharePoint, you're talking about Windows Server, you're talking about SQL, you're talking about Office web apps, you're talking about Windows Server, you're talking about load balancer. There is so many under things which come under the single umbrella called as SharePoint, right? So let's say you're planning a SharePoint on-premises environment, right? So of course you need a Windows server on which you have to install SharePoint. And of course you need a backend SQL server which is going to host the content, right? And let's say you want Office web app so that users can open their documents in a browser mode, then you need Office web apps, right? And Hyper-V machines. Let's say you're having a SharePoint farm which has like some 15 servers, right? It's not quite possible for anybody to have individual physical servers for all those 10 servers, right? So you need Hyper-V for that, and then you get the load balancer, which takes care of managing user traffic, and Internet Information Service, which is going to hold the site and which is going to expose your site towards the internet or intranet or whatever. And as I clearly mentioned above, so any newer version of SharePoint, right, it means you're gonna need a more amount of RAM, you're gonna need a more amount of CPU, and you're obviously gonna need a more amount of everything. All right. So when SharePoint 2010 came into market, the software and hardware prerequisites for 2010 were totally different. I mean, we were talking about 2008 server boxes, we were talking about SQL 2008 R2 when it was 2010, but that was not the case when it came to 2013, right? In 2013, the prerequisites totally differed. That's the same for 2016 as well. And I mean, that's one way of Microsoft trying to sell their products. So any newer version of SharePoint on-premises means we are talking about more RAM, we are talking about more CPU, and we are talking about more everything. So the architecture tasks, okay, so what you need to do, let's say you're planning for on-premises implementation, what is that you need to care about? What is that you need to have so that you can run an on-premises version of SharePoint? So in order for you to decide what you need, it's better you understand that what your customers are expecting from SharePoint, right? Of course, you can't have a SharePoint farm without user profile service, without search. But in addition to that, let's say your users are looking for some cool functionality like SSRS reports. Or let's say they're looking for some cool functionality such as they want some BI stuff, okay? So you need to plan your SharePoint topology in such a manner that it is achieving the business goals, right? So it is very important that you get to understand what the business is looking for, what they are really trying to achieve from SharePoint, and then you can go ahead and plan the topology. And once you're done, let's say you set up all the AD stuff, you've done the DNS stuff, you did the VM thing, and you just sized the hardware. You scaled it out, and you did all those kind of stuff, right? It is very important that you perform a validation testing. Okay, when I say validation testing, it is about, let's say you can't have a SharePoint site wherein user opens the site and he just keeps seeing on the screen, right? The site should just boom, the site should come up. Okay, so things like that are very important. So once you roll out a SharePoint implementation, do a lot of testing. Make sure that you're targeting some pilot users. Try to make sure that they're happy with what you delivered, and then is when you expose it to all your end users. And you can design your disaster recovery environment with on-premises. So let's say you have your SharePoint on-premises farm somewhere in, let's say you have it on Mumbai. Okay, that is where your production farm is. You could have a DR for that somewhere in Kolkata or maybe somewhere in Bangalore. So that is the DR. Let's say for any given reason, the main production farm goes down. You always have a DR to which you can fail over to. So this is about when you need to choose this model and when you're not supposed to choose an on-premises model. Okay, as you can clearly see on the slide, when to choose this model. Okay, when your organization is not ready to accept cloud services. Okay, let's say your organization's legal policy says, you know what, I don't want my documents or my contents to sit on a data center that is not within my control, and they are not ready and they are not cool with that. So in that case, you just can't go ahead and say, why don't we go ahead and use SharePoint Online? That's quite not possible because the organized legal policy says they are not ready to cloud services. Okay, and of course, when you have all the required resources, let's say when we are talking about SharePoint, right? We need a guy to manage SharePoint. We need a guy to manage the Windows server. Of course, we need a guy to battle around with SQL. And of course, we need a guy to take care of all the networking stuff and all those things. And when you're ready to afford all these things, that is when you move towards an on-premises mode of implementation. Okay. And you do not want to expose your SharePoint site towards internet. for the most part, any on-premises implementation would be for an intranet kind of thing, right? So let's say you want to have your a site which is just meant for the people who are within your organization, then on-premises is the right thing to go with. It doesn't mean that when you're running on-premises you cannot expose your sites to the internet. You can always do that, but that's going to be quite painful because you have to do a lot of work to expose your site towards the internet. All right. And we all know these WSP solutions which we deploy on SharePoint to get the kind of customizations that we are looking for. Okay, so let's say you're having a SharePoint form which is heavily customized, right? You have all these cool things within your SharePoint site, and it is heavily customized, and it's quite impractical for you to move it towards Office 365. Okay, you just can't afford to have all those customizations in Office 365. So in that case, just stop thinking about having move towards SharePoint Online, and you can live with SharePoint on premises. So when not to choose this model, okay, let's say you don't have enough data center capacity. Let's say when you're going to plan SharePoint to on-premises version, right? Forget about the implementation, forget about the software, forget about the hardware and software requirements, all those stuff. But what about the real user data, right? So let's say that is going to be tremendous amount of data, and you should really have enough space within your data center to afford them, right? In SharePoint, all the data which you're having, it's going to sit on the backend SQL server, right? It's gonna sit in the backend database, and you should have enough space within your data center to afford that. And when you don't have all those kind of stuff taken care, then you just can't think about having an on-premises mode of implementation. And as I already said before, right? So when you do not want your SharePoint site to be exposed out of your firewall, then please stop thinking about having any other mode. You can just go with SharePoint on-premises mode. This is the licensing requirements for on-premises deployment. So if you're planning for licensing requirements, right? If you're planning for SharePoint on-premises, let's say the business comes to you and say, you know what, we are planning for a SharePoint on-premises implementation, and I want you to come up with the complete plan. So I want you to give me the plan of what are the kind of licensing we are looking for, what is the kind of hardware we are looking for, what is the kind of software we are looking for, and then all this information could be found here. So for 2016, this is what we need, and for 2013, this is what we need. Okay, and there is a link down there. That's an article which I wrote about explaining about SharePoint server licensing. I understand it's quite confusing to understand SharePoint server licensing. Okay, there is a lot of stuff which comes within it. It goes with the number of servers on which you install it, how users use it, from what kind of device they are trying to use it. So I would urge you all to go to that link, read it for yourself, and try to understand what SharePoint server licensing really means, so that when you're talking to your business about an on-premises implementation, then you can certainly answer their queries. So moving on towards the next model, which is SharePoint Online SaaS. Okay, so SaaS is nothing but it is a type in cloud computing, which is nothing but software as a service. Okay, so with SaaS, the only thing which you get is, right, so whatever I spoke about in my previous slide, right, like the hardware, software, and patching, CU, upgrading, and all those kind of stuff is not even going to come into picture when you're using a SharePoint, when you're going to use a SaaS model. Okay, because Microsoft is going to take care of that. You just don't need to bother about installing a CU. You don't need to bother about pushing a Windows patch. You just don't need to bother about having a hotfix. You just don't need to bother about doing a service pack upgrade. Everything is going to be taken care of by Microsoft. Your job is just to take care of SharePoint, take care of the contents within SharePoint, take care of any customizations which you want to implement. That's all you need to worry about. So what is Office 365? It is a suite by Microsoft which has all these products in it. It has Exchange Online, it has SharePoint Online, it has Skype for Business, Office 365, and of course it has, these are the 4 core components. So any company which would move for Office 365 would be for taking Exchange, either Exchange or SharePoint or Skype for Business or Office 365, or it could be a complete bundle of everything. So these are the core components, and then we have some additional components such as Project Online or Visio Pro or Yammer, or the recent ones which came out, the Office 365 groups, or the Microsoft Teams, which got released a couple of weeks back. So Office 365 is nothing but it is a cloud suite of all these products put together, so that you don't need to really invest or waste your time on implementing them. So you as a person can go ahead and buy Office 365 and you can just utilize the application, and you just don't need to bother about installing it, configuring it, or patching it, or taking care of all those stuff. So that's a picture of how SharePoint Online is going to look like. Okay, so let me explain this to you. Let's say if you're as a user, you go to your company, you log into your PC, and then you access your email using the Outlook address given to you. I mean, everything is possible because there is an AD account which is given to you to authenticate yourself, and using that account you're logging in towards your PC, and then you're trying to access your Exchange, or you're accessing any other application which you have access to, or whatever. So that similar way in SharePoint Online, that's how it works in cloud. It's just that you need an identity on the cloud to access those applications. All right. So you have an AD account. Using that AD account, you could access Exchange, but that may not be the case. You can't use the same account and access the same thing on the cloud. You could certainly do it when when there is an integration between your account which is given to you and to the identity which is there in the cloud. Okay, so for accessing SharePoint Online, you need to have your account synced with Microsoft Azure. Okay, so this is an overview of how SharePoint Online looks like. So this is certain points which I've given here so that it helps you understand about what SharePoint Online is all about. As I already spoke about in my previous slide, Microsoft is going to take care of the complete architecture, the infrastructure, and everything. Okay, your job is only limited to managing the documents, the contents, as well as the users and their licenses. You just don't need to bother about anything else. And of course, the CUs, the hotfixes, the patches, and all those kind of stuff will be taken care by Microsoft. So users have to access, users gain access to SharePoint Online using an account which is in Azure AD. Without that, it's not possible for any of us to access an application which is on cloud. Okay, it's not within your data center, it is sitting somewhere else, and you need an identity to access that. I mean, there is a point which went down. I'm not sure whether you guys can really see that, right? So SharePoint will be deployed on a dedicated Microsoft data center, and it won't be within your jurisdiction. So the architecture task, let's say you decided to go with SharePoint Online. Okay. So what you need to do, what are the things that you need to care about, what are the things that you need to be mindful of when you're planning for a SharePoint Online implementation? The first and foremost, you should have an identity in the cloud, which is possible using any of the models, right? Let's say you have this dir sync, you have the Active Directory sync, Azure AD sync, as well as you have the recent one which called as AD Connect. So tools like this are the ones which map your account from on-premises, your Active Directory account in on-premises towards the cloud. So using them, you can sync your account towards the cloud, so you get to access SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, or whatever it is. Okay. I'll be speaking in detail about what those tools mean and how to choose the right identity model in my upcoming slides. And then of course you need to have some third-party certificates. So these certificates are required so that you you integrate your on-premises those identities with online. You're going to plan the tenant name. Let's say your company name is XYZ, right? So you need to make sure that your SharePoint tenant has that XYZ name on it, and you're the one who's going to design the architecture. As I spoke about a couple of slides back, the information architecture and governance plan, right? That holds true for SharePoint Online as well. Maybe you're not responsible about caring about the environment, but still the security policies as well as the information architecture, that's still under your control, and you are the one who's responsible for maintaining that. Microsoft just can't involve themselves on those kind of stuff. It is you who has to take care of it. And you can plan your customizations, solutions, and apps for SharePoint. So these are the three types of options which Microsoft has given us for for syncing our on-premises AD account to cloud. As you all are aware, dir sync and Active Directory sync has been deprecated. So Microsoft has already announced that those two products won't be available from 2017 onwards. Okay, so the only tool which you have to go with is Active Directory AAD Connect, and AAD Connect is something which has the functionalities of both dir sync as well as AAD sync. Okay, so if you're an organization who's looking towards moving for SharePoint Online or Exchange Online or whatever it is, make sure that you're choosing AAD Connect, because in a couple of months both these won't even be there, because Microsoft has already announced that those products will be deprecated and you need to go with AAD Connect. So this is the slide which explains about the right model. Okay. Um, let's say you're a small shop. Okay. Let's say you are a startup company wherein you have just some 50 plus users. Okay. You just can't afford to have an Active Directory or domain controller, or you just can't afford to have the server infrastructure to build a domain controller, all those kind of stuff. All you have to do is you're just planning about, you know what, I just want to use SharePoint Online or Exchange Online or all those kind of stuff, and I want my identity only to be on the cloud. So let me go ahead and create my accounts on the cloud so that my users can directly use those usernames and passwords and they can access whatever they want. I just don't want my accounts to be synced. I don't want to use any dir sync or AAD sync and sync my on-premises account to cloud and then my users get to use. I just don't want to do all those kind of stuff because I just can't afford for that. You could just have your identities in the cloud. You could just have your accounts created in Azure AD and you can access it. The second one is the synchronized identity. So this is where stuff like dir sync as well as Active Directory sync comes into picture. So in this model, whatever accounts are available in your on-premises AD will be synced towards cloud so that users get to access your cloud application like SharePoint Online or Exchange Online using the same username and password. Right? You just don't want your users logging into their PC with a different username and password, and they end up using a different username and password to access SharePoint Online or Exchange Online. Okay, you just could have them synced so that users don't need to, use so many credentials to access a cloud application. And it's so brilliant in such a manner that, let's say a user changes his password in Office 365, right? It can be replicated in on-premises as well, right? You could have the password sync, you could have the password write back and all those kind of stuff. The third model is federated identity. I hope you're all aware of ADFS. So the federated identity uses Active Directory Federation Service. So most of the time it just don't, people just don't try to understand how ADFS works, right? So what happens is ADFS is almost the same way of what synchronized identity do. Okay, the only difference is when you're logging in towards a cloud application, right? What ADFS does is it goes back and talks to your Active Directory domain controller. Let's say I'm logging in as user A. I'm giving my credentials to access SharePoint Online. It will go back to Active Directory, it will try to validate my credentials, and then is when it is going to allow you to access any cloud application. So that's just the key difference. So try to understand that when you're using an ADFS for single sign-on, the application is going to validate you by checking with the AD on-premises, and only then it is going to allow you inside. Okay. So when to choose this model? So what are the let's say you have certain kind of business goals, you have certain kind of business requirements. The organization came to you and said, boss, you know what, this is what I'm trying to look for, so tell me which is the right model. Okay, so when you choose for SharePoint Online, these are the ones that you need to be thinking about, and this is when you would choose SharePoint Online, right? Your organization is okay with choosing cloud, they just don't care about where your data lives. They're okay with that. Okay, maybe you're a person who are sitting in India and the document or all those stuff, it is sitting somewhere in a data center which is in America. They're totally fine with that, they're okay with that. And you just don't want to invest your time, manpower and your dollars on on taking care of the IT infrastructure, patching the environment and all those kind of stuff. Then just please go ahead with this kind of model, because Microsoft is going to take care for that. And when you're a small shop, let's say you're a startup company, you hardly have some 50 or 100 users, and you just can't afford in building all the existing infrastructure, then you can go with SharePoint Online, right? And faster user provisioning. It's just a few clicks away, right? When you want to log in towards, when you want to set up an Office 365 tenant, Office 365 subscription for yourself, right? It should hardly take not more than an hour, right? You're just gonna give in your tenant details, you're just gonna give the domain and all those kind of stuff, and boom, you're done, right? And when you want to stay up to date, maybe you're a company who prefers to be up to date, you're more keen on all the latest CUs which Microsoft released, you're more keen on all the patches and hot fixes, right? But you just don't want to spend your time in installing CUs, you just don't want to spend your time in installing all those things. Then you move towards SharePoint Online, and obviously there is going to be some updated virus definitions as well, which is going to take care of the content which lives in SharePoint Online. and you don't want to spend your time in managing all those logs or all those backups and all those kind of stuff, of course you need to move to SharePoint Online. And the reliability, the SLA for SharePoint Online is always 99%. Okay, there is a pretty good article out there in TechNet which speaks about Microsoft's SLA for Office 365, and it has never gone down less than 99% for the past 4 to 5 years. It's been varying from 99.9, 99.8, 99.7, but it has never gone down. Microsoft has always promised to make sure that, none of these services goes down, and because of this you get a huge business impact. That has never ever been the case. Okay. And of course, get to access SharePoint Online or Office 365 from a web interface. You're just not going to log into some server, open it, and you're just not going to read some logs to see all those errors. Nothing. It's just a web console, and you just get to manage everything. When not to choose this model? Okay, so as I already spoke about before, when your organization doesn't really want to use cloud, and let's say maybe you're working for a bank, or maybe you're working for a pharmaceutical company, right? When you're working for a bank, you're going to have stuff like the kind of the bank details of the customers. You're going to have the customer information. You're going to have a lot of confidential and classified information, and you just can't have those information on cloud, and the customers are not happy about it, right? So in that case, you do not want to choose to move to SharePoint Online. Okay, and when you prefer to have the complete control of the entire environment. So what I mean by this is, let's say it is you who decides, right? When you want to decide that this is when I want to patch my environment, this is how I want, this is this kind of maybe there is a CU released by Microsoft today, but I don't want to do that. So when you want to have the complete control over the entire environment, then just don't go for SharePoint Online. Okay, and then of course you have some kind of critical customizations, right? So as you're all aware, SharePoint has this kind of functionality, like when you're patching the environment, right, it tends to go ahead and break some customizations. Let's say there is some kind of a development company which has did all the kind of development stuff for your SharePoint environment, and you deployed that in SharePoint Online, and tomorrow Microsoft pushes a patch which breaks it, and you just do not want that to happen, then it's better you stay with SharePoint on premises. Okay, that's what the next point speaks about. You have so much of complex customizations, and it's quite complex, and I already spoke about this before. You have some farm solutions, right? And I hope you're all aware that it's not possible for you to have farm solutions in SharePoint Online. Okay, you could have user solutions, you can have sandbox solutions, but you just can't have farm solutions in SharePoint Online, because you don't even get to see a SharePoint farm when it is in SharePoint Online. And when you're concerned about your network bandwidth, that is a very important point, guys. So whatever it is, be it SharePoint Online, you're still trying to access a content which is sitting on the internet, and you need to be very sure that you're having the enough network bandwidth to access that. When you're not really having enough bandwidth, then you just can't go ahead and open your documents which is sitting in SharePoint Online, or edit it, or do all those kind of cool stuff. So it's very important that you have a very good network bandwidth so that you get to access something which is sitting on the cloud. So the way SharePoint on-premises works and SharePoint Online works, it totally differs in terms of licensing as well, right? There is no subscription model when it comes towards Office 365. It's all licenses. Okay, you have to just choose the license. Let's say you're a company which has some 100 users, so you're going to purchase 100 licenses for yourself, and tomorrow some 10 employees leave. You don't need to pay Microsoft for those things. When they leave, you can just say, I don't want those licenses. For the next month, you'll be just paying only for those 90 licenses. That's how it works, right? So it's kind of pretty cool, where you really do not want to end up spending more amount of money. So as you can see, these are the different type of service plans which Microsoft has given for Office 365. Let's say if we are speaking about just 300 users, you could go with the Business Essentials or Business Premium. Okay, let's say if you're a large enterprise customer where you have lakhs and lakhs of employees, right, then you get to choose either one among this E1, E3, E4 or E5. And if you're a college student, let's say you're running a college or you're running a school, right? And you just want to implement Office 365 for your school children's, or for maybe for your college students, right? Then you get to go with the education plan, right? You don't, I mean, you can't just go ahead and give stuff like Exchange Online, or let's say you can't go ahead and give stuff like Visio Pro for college going kids or school going kids. They just won't even understand what that means. For them, maybe they're just looking for Exchange Online, or maybe they're looking for SharePoint Online. So that is when you go ahead and choose the education plan. And then of course for government, we have a plan for government, and this is this screen cap which you see here is from TechNet. So you can just go ahead and take a look at all these things. So each and everything, you can go ahead and look at the plans, what is offered in each and every single plan, and then you can choose what is the right plan for your business. So this is a detailed link, so just go to that link. It's going to tell you about what plans we are looking for, right? So Office 365 Enterprise E1, it is 480 per user per month, and this is what you get. So you get Exchange Online, you get OneDrive for Business, and you get SharePoint Online. Okay, let's say you're moving towards Office 365 Enterprise E3, it's 1,200 rupees per user per month. So it keeps varying. So you are the one who's going to decide what your customers are looking for and what they want. Let's say if they just want SharePoint Online alone, they just don't want Exchange or whatever it is, we have a model for that. We have a plan for that. You can just go ahead with that. You can talk to Microsoft. You can say, you know what, I just want to use Exchange Online. I do not want to use SharePoint. I do not want to use Skype for Business. I'm least bothered about Office Pro Plus. I just want Exchange Online. Obviously, Microsoft has a plan for that. You can just talk to them, and you just need to pay only for Exchange Online. So that's a link which I'm given there. You can go to that link, and it gives you all the information you're looking for. So signing up for an Office 365 trial plan, so that is a link to an article which I wrote a couple of months back. Okay, so maybe you're new to Office 365 and you just want to play around with the plan. Okay, you want to know what you get on an E5 plan, you want to know what you get on an E3 plan, you want to know what you get on an E1 plan. It's quite possible you could subscribe for a trial plan, and Microsoft is going to give you a trial plan for 1 month. Okay, so for that 1 month you don't need to pay even a single penny to Microsoft, and you can just go ahead and use all these services given by them. And once you're comfortable, once you feel that, okay, I feel like this, it makes sense for me to implement this for my customers, you can obviously go ahead and subscribe for a complete plan. So this is a trial plan, and this is the link given by me. This is how you would sign up for a trial plan, and you can go ahead and use it. So the third model is the SharePoint hybrid model. Okay, so as you can see, I think the picture explains it all, right? So in SharePoint hybrid, you get to use both online as well as on premises. So ideally it's a mix of both. Okay, it's a mix of online as well as on premises, so that you get to enjoy the features and functionalities of both the environments. That's what SharePoint hybrid means. So let's get into the details. So an overview of what SharePoint hybrid is all about. Let's say you have an on-premises version of Exchange Server or SharePoint Server or Skype for Business, and you purchased an Office 365 subscription. Okay, and you're planning to integrate both of them to achieve a common business goal. That is called as hybrid. It's as simple as that. So I have listed down certain features which can go hybrid in SharePoint. Okay, this, for the most part, this is quite confusing for everyone, because when we speak about SharePoint hybrid, right, we are just not sure about what are the things that can go hybrid, what are the things which cannot go hybrid. Okay, so the features which I have listed down before, the points which I've given, these are the ones which can go hybrid. Okay, so you get to have a hybrid OneDrive for Business, you get to have hybrid site features wherein you get site following, you get hybrid profiles, you get hybrid extensive op launcher, and then you have this hybrid search. So this was something which every other SharePoint professional was looking for, right? So hybrid search is something which is really pretty cool. And then you have this extranet sharing, you get to have this Office graph, and then in the I hope you're all aware that the Future Pack 1 for SharePoint was released a couple of weeks back. Okay, so even in that, Microsoft introduced two hybrid features, which is nothing but the SharePoint auditing functionality as well as the SharePoint taxonomy. So let's talk in detail about what is this all about and what they mean. Okay, so with hybrid OneDrive for Business, so first of all, in order for you to roll out a hybrid OneDrive for Business for your customers, you should be running SharePoint 2013 Service Pack 1. Okay, that is the basic prerequisite, and it comes by default with SharePoint 2016, the beta version. Okay, so it is available in these two versions of SharePoint. So just let's think about the reason why anybody would think about having a OneDrive for Business in a hybrid mode. Okay, if you're aware about all the Office 365 plans, right? Then when you're having a OneDrive for Business implementation on premises, you just can't go ahead and say your customers like, you know what, you get to enjoy 50 GB of OneDrive for Business. That's quite not possible, because that 50 GB of data which you're giving to your customer is going to sit in your data center and it's going to consume a lot of space. But that is not the case when you're using SharePoint Online, when you're using OneDrive for Business in the cloud. With OneDrive for Business on the cloud, Microsoft offers you 1 terabyte of size. Okay, it's 1000 gigabytes, so it's 1 terabytes of size on the cloud, and it is given for per user. So per user in in Office 365 gets to enjoy 1 terabyte of size. So when you plan to implement hybrid OneDrive for Business, right? Let's say when your users are clicking on their My Site, and when they want to go and access their OneDrive for Business in their My Site, it'll automatically redirect them towards their towards their My Site in SharePoint Online, where you get 1 terabyte of storage. Okay, so of course you have to plan about moving all the contents from their on-premises OneDrive to their Office 365 OneDrive, but this is what you get to enjoy. Once you're running hybrid, a click on the on-premises will take you towards your Office 365 SharePoint Online OneDrive for Business. All right, so moving on, the hybrid site following functionality. Okay, I hope you're aware of the the social features which Microsoft came up with 2013. Okay, there was a tremendous effort which Microsoft did to all these social collaboration features. I mean, we had this the trending tags, we had this follow stuff, we had all this kind of news feeds, the things which came up in 2013. So the remarkable thing which I really like about the following is these, the hybrid site following. You can follow a site. Once you start following a site, you just start to get all the conversations which happen on the site's newsfeed on your My Site newsfeed, and it's quite possible for your SharePoint site following to be hybrid. So the basic prerequisites for that is you should be running the Service Pack 1 of SharePoint 2013 with the September 2015 public update, and it comes by default with SharePoint 2016 beta version. Okay, so with hybrid site following, what's going to happen is your users don't need to go towards their SharePoint on-premises My Site and see the sites which they are following there, and then they go to their SharePoint Online My Site and they're going to see a My Site there. That's not what it is all about. They are going to get a unified view wherein in a single My Site they get to see everything they want. They get to see all the sites they are following. Okay, of course this won't have any impact on the newsfeed functionalities. The newsfeeds are going to be different. Okay, the document following is going to be different. It's going to be, let's say you're following a document in on-premises, it's going to be, it's going to get different view altogether. You need to go to your SharePoint My Site in on-premises to see what are the documents you're following, what is the trending tag you're following. That's not going to change. That's going to be the way it is. But the only thing which is going to change is the hybrid site following. Let me show you the view of how it's going to look like. So this is how it's going to look like. So when an end user is going towards his My Site, right, this is how he's going to see it. He's going to see the SharePoint Online sites which he is following, and then he's going to see the SharePoint on-premises sites which is going to be following under a unified view. He doesn't want to go towards two different places to see them. Then hybrid profiles and app launcher. So these are the things which got newly introduced in SharePoint 2016. Okay, so with hybrid profiles, the moment a user clicks on his My Site, it is going to take him towards his Delve profile. I'm not sure how many people are aware of Office 365 Delve. Okay, if not, please go ahead and try to learn about it. It's a pretty cool feature. To put it in simple words, Office 365 Delve is nothing about, it gives it's just going to surface the contents which an end user is seeing on a SharePoint Online site as well as with his OneDrive for Business, and it's going to give you an unified view where you can see everything. Okay, it's been designed in such a brilliant manner that it can it can bring up the documents which you're looking for without even you going towards the sites and looking for it. It's quite a cool stuff. Please go ahead and try to Google about Office 365 Delve and try to understand about it. The extensible app launcher. Okay, It's nothing but in SharePoint Online and when you're implementing SharePoint 2016 as with SharePoint Online, when there is an integration, you have this as you can see in this picture above, right? This app launcher, and you see when I'm placing my mouse over here, right? So this is the place. So you get to pin the sites that you use quite frequently. You get to pin your news feed. You get to pin the sites that you're following your OneDrive. So what is that even trying to give you? You're saying you get to pin it. So what I'm even trying to achieve it from you. So let me tell you what. Let's say from your SharePoint 2016 on-premises site, you get to pin a site from SharePoint Online. Okay, let's say you're using a SharePoint 2016 on-premises site, and when you go ahead and you get the opportunity of pinning a SharePoint Online site, you get the opportunity of pinning a news feed which is on your SharePoint Online. So it is an integration of both. It's not that you're going to see two different worlds altogether. From here, just a click away, you can go to SharePoint Online. So you get to pin all those kind of stuff. So that is what hybrid extensible app launcher is all about. And this is a SharePoint professional, this is our favorite part, right? I mean, search is something which you just can't, this is something which is a rich functionality in SharePoint, and even search can go hybrid. So there are two types of hybrid search. One is the cloud hybrid search, and the next one is hybrid federated search. So of course you need to run the Service Pack 1 of SharePoint 2013 with Jan 2016 CU. So that is the prerequisite for having hybrid search. And then you need to have SharePoint Server 2016, the beta version 1. Okay, so that is a small diagram of how hybrid search would look like and hybrid federated search would look like. So I'll just explain that in a moment. Okay, so with cloud hybrid search, so if you take a look at this diagram, what this means is with cloud hybrid search, okay, the indexed components, right? Let's say from the index components from your SharePoint on premises as well as the index component from your SharePoint online will be sitting on Office 365 alone. Okay, so whenever a user is trying to execute a search query from SharePoint from a SharePoint on premises site, he gets to see the results from Office 365 as well, and it is exactly the vice versa. Let's say a user from SharePoint online tries to execute a search query, he gets to see the results from SharePoint on premise as well. Okay, and here the indexing is designed in such a manner that it sits within Office 365. And this is the user experience. You see the view here. So this is also, you can see search results from online, from on premises, just from a single search center. The next one is hybrid federated search. So this is almost similar. It just differs in a way it has been architectured. Okay, so here you get to see two indexes, two index components. Okay, the SharePoint Server index component is going to be sitting within SharePoint Server. The Office 365 index component is going to be sitting within Office 365. But the way you search doesn't differ. You could still have a user searching for his content in SharePoint on premise, and he can get the results from Office 365. It's just the way it differs in the way it is architectured. I think if you take a look at the user experience, you would get to understand how it's going to work, right? You execute a search query, it's going to give you the results from SharePoint on premises, and it's going to give you the results from SharePoint online. It's just the results will be displayed in two different categories, saying that what, this result is coming from your SharePoint on premises index, and this result is coming from your SharePoint online index. The next one is extranet sharing and Microsoft Office Delve. So to put it in simple words, right? If you have an on-premises implementation and you want your sites to be exposed towards internet, right, there is quite a lot of stuff you have to do, right? Let's say if you have a SharePoint site, right, and you're planning that, I want the site to be exposed to my internet so that my business partners, my customers can get to access the site. So in that case, you need to make sure that you're having the enough alternate access mappings. You have to plan that you're putting a site on the DMZ zone. You need to make sure that you have the necessary authentications taken place. Let's say it could be forms based, or it could be ADFS. You just can't have anonymous. That's not that's not advisable at all. But there is quite a good amount of work which you have to do if you want to expose your sites towards internet. But once you're running hybrid, you just don't need to worry about that, because let's say you have a site. Let's say you want a site to be exposed towards the internet. Just choose a SharePoint online site, put your contents there, and just share and just invite your users so that they won't even be seeing the content which is sitting on SharePoint on premises. Okay, and Office Graph and Office Delve. So as I spoke about, Delve is a new component which came up with Office 365. I believe it's been a year back when Delve was introduced by Microsoft. Okay, it gives a personalized view of contents from your SharePoint Online and from your OneDrive for Business that is relevant to you. Okay, it doesn't tell something which you may not be interested upon. It's designed in such a manner that it tracks the kind of contents you're accessing, it tracks the kind of sites you're accessing, and it gives you a unified view so that you can just click the document which you're looking for directly, and it will just serve your purpose. And once you're running hybrid search, you get to enjoy Office Graph as well as Delve. And these two functionalities, the SharePoint hybrid auditing and hybrid taxonomy, this was introduced in the Future Pack 1 of SharePoint Server 2016. Okay, as you're all aware, the Future Pack 1 for SharePoint 2016 was introduced a couple of weeks back, and these two functionalities which I'm talking about is still in the preview mode. Okay, it's not completely out for it's not a completely developed product. It is still in the preview mode. So with hybrid auditing, you as a SharePoint administrator can audit what your end users are accessing in the SharePoint on-premises site as well as in the SharePoint Online site. I think that's kind of really pretty cool, right? Because you get to see what your users are doing, what kind of document they're accessing, what kind of document they're deleting, what kind of document they're modifying. All those kind of stuff can be audited. And hybrid taxonomy, right? You could have your taxonomy created in SharePoint on-premises, and you can have that shared with SharePoint Online. And it's exactly the vice versa. You could have your taxonomy created on SharePoint Online, and you could have that on SharePoint on-premises as well. So with hybrid taxonomy, you get to do that. And these are some references which I've put for you. So if you are planning for configuring a hybrid OneDrive for Business, so these are some pretty good documentation from Microsoft TechNet. So please go ahead, please try to read it, and please try to understand what it really takes to have a hybrid implementation. Okay. So when to choose this model? By now you would have, I don't think I even need to explain when to choose this model. Okay, because when we are talking about hybrid, we are talking about both SharePoint on-premises and SharePoint Online. So whatever I spoke for SharePoint Online and whatever I spoke for SharePoint on-premises, it's a mixture of both these things. Okay, but there could be few more changes. So when to choose this model is when your organization is okay with using a cloud service. Okay, and let's say you're planning to move towards the cloud. Let's say you have an on-premises mode of installation. Let's say you have a big SharePoint farm of some 10 plus servers, and the data is of gigabytes of size. There are tons, and there are lots of data. You just don't know where the data resides, and there is a lot of customizations. You're working with a vendor who customized an application, the application for you. You're trying to work with him, and you're trying to understand whether the customization which he made on on-premises can be moved towards SharePoint Online. So in that case, you could have a SharePoint on-premises farm running, and you can also adapt SharePoint Online, and you can slowly move your contents to SharePoint Online at your own pace. Okay, it could be for 6 months, it could be for 1 year, it could be for 2 years. It just depends upon how big your SharePoint farm is. So in that case, you could run hybrid so that you get to move your contents at your own pace. And it could be another scenario wherein you as a maybe your business is looking forward towards moving SharePoint Online, but they're just planning to do it in a safe way such that some sensitive contents because the sensitive contents has to be on SharePoint on-premises, and maybe your business partners or customers are not really fine with having those documents in an online site, and they prefer to have it on SharePoint on-premises, right? So in that case, yeah, of course you have to run hybrid. So when not to choose this model, it is exactly what you say for SharePoint Online. Okay, so when your organization is not okay with cloud services, when you do not want your SharePoint site to be exposed beyond your firewalls, and you have customizations, you have very huge amount of farm solutions, customizations, and it's not quite possible for you to move towards SharePoint Online because it just wouldn't work there. So in that case, you better stop thinking about running hybrid. And last but not least, let's not forget that SharePoint Online doesn't support farm solutions till date. So till date, SharePoint farm solutions is not supported there. Okay. Speaking about this, I could just, there was a scenario wherein when I was working for a customer a couple of years back. Okay. So every time, so they had a legal policy such that every new user who joined the organization and he got access to SharePoint, right? The moment he is clicking on the SharePoint site homepage, there will be the terms and conditions thing which there will be a pop-up of the terms and conditions, which he has to go through and accept it, and only after signing it he can go ahead and use SharePoint. And that entire terms and conditions thing was a farm solution, okay, and the legal policy of that particular firm is that such that every user has to go through it, and every user has to read it, agreed, and only then he can access it. And while we were deciding about moving our footprints, moving our workloads towards SharePoint Online, we just spoke to the vendor who did the customization for us. Everything went pretty cool, but we were caught up in a scenario where we just couldn't move this solution which takes care of terms and conditions to SharePoint Online. Okay, and that was a $1 billion investment which they did on that customization, and we just couldn't afford to move it. And the organization's legal policy clearly said that we just can't have our end users accessing SharePoint without going through those terms and conditions. It's pretty mandatory that they go through it, they agree to it, and we had to do a quite of workaround for that. And so what I'm trying to tell from this is, whenever you're trying to move towards SharePoint Online, or whenever you're trying to move towards SharePoint Hybrid, try to understand your environment, try to study your environment, try to understand about all the customizations, speak to your vendors, try to speak to the developers who develop the customization, make sure that it is possible to have the same customizations in SharePoint Online as well. If you just can't do it, then I don't think you're just going to get the complete out of it, right? If you just can't move a customization which is really mission critical to SharePoint Online, then you just doesn't make sense to move to SharePoint Online. It's as simple as that. So the architectural tasks is pretty much what we see for SharePoint on-premises and SharePoint Online. Since it's a mix of both, we need to have the architectural tasks for both SharePoint Online as well as SharePoint Online. You need to plan the network connectivity between on-premises and SharePoint Online, because both of them would be integrated in a hybrid model. You need to plan the server certificates, the trust certificates, necessary SSL certificates should be taken care of, and choose the right identity model, right? I spoke about the models such as the model where I spoke about cloud identity, synchronized identity, and Active Directory for this. So choose the right identity model which suits your business. Okay, I believe the first model won't come into picture here, and the next two models you have to choose which suits your business. You need to plan the user profile migration to SharePoint Online so that your profiles could be hybrid, and the dedicated search service farm. Let's say if you're planning for SharePoint 2013 search to be hybrid. Okay, so August 2015 CU for SharePoint 2013 is when Microsoft introduced the hybrid search functionality. That is when Microsoft announced about, if you're installing August 2015 CU, you could have hybrid search. So if you're planning for making your SharePoint farm to be hybrid in a 2013 environment, make sure that your SharePoint farm is patched with SharePoint 2015. Okay, if not, then you just can't think about having hybrid search. So decide which features to integrate and workloads to move. Okay, it's just not, as I spoke about, it's just not all the features which you could move. Maybe there are certain features which would really not go well with cloud, right? You just have to keep this in the on-premises. Okay, you just can't move it there so that it breaks. And the OneDrive for Business redirect, right? So let's say you want to move all your contents from your OneDrive for Business on-premises site to online, so that you get to enjoy that 1 TB space. You need to plan that so that the moment the users are clicking on their SharePoint on-premises My Site, they get to be redirected to the SharePoint OneDrive for Business here. And the licensing requirements, it's a mixture of both. Okay, since we are going to have SharePoint on-premises as well as online in hybrid, so you have to make sure that you're satisfying the licensing requirements for both on-premises as well as for SharePoint Online. So for SharePoint Online, as I already said before, it is licensed, so you need to make sure that your end users are having all the licenses. Okay, let's say a hybrid search is there, and for a user to make use of this hybrid search, he has to make sure that he is present on-premises and he's also present on online by having the necessary license. Only then he could run a search and get the results from both SharePoint on-premises as well as SharePoint Online. That's how the way it works. Okay, and for a user to be redirected from his OneDrive from his on-premises OneDrive for Business towards his Office 365 OneDrive for Business, we need to make sure that he has the necessary licenses in SharePoint Online, and he has the necessary permissions on his SharePoint on-premises site, or the necessary whatever it is. Okay, and apart from that, if this is what we saw a couple of slides back for SharePoint, implementing SharePoint 2016 on-premises mode, these are the softwares that we would be which we should be needing, and for SharePoint 2013, these are the ones which we would be in need of. Okay, so the last model, my favorite one, which is SharePoint infrastructure as a service. Okay, So as you could see, the three known vendors for infrastructure as a service, the first and foremost AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. And it's quite possible for SharePoint to be running on a Amazon hardware as well as on Azure hardware as well as Google platform. So you could have SharePoint implemented in either one of those. Okay. So obviously these three vendors are known for cloud for implementing SharePoint, but in this session I'll be talking more about implementing SharePoint on Azure. So this is a picture which speaks about having SharePoint on Azure. This is how it's going to look like. Okay. So this entire diagram, this entire layout which you see, it is nothing but having a SharePoint farm on a Microsoft Azure data center. Okay, and this entire thing is your Active Directory which is sitting within your on-premises environment. And for you to make sure that your end users who are sitting here get to access the SharePoint site which is within Microsoft Azure, right? You need to make sure that you're planning your site-to-site VPN, your express route, and all those kind of stuff. The overview. So why would anybody need to move towards Azure, right? They could always think about moving towards Office 365 because Office 365 is pretty cool, right? I mean, everything is taken care of by Microsoft. Then why do you even need to bother about moving towards an infrastructure as a service cloud platform? So I think the contents in this slide should explain that for you. So you get to use, you get the best out of SQL Server as well as SharePoint, and all the computing resources are almost available immediately with no commitment. Of course, SharePoint Online is in the cloud, but with SharePoint Infrastructure as a Service, you get to have the complete control over the entire SharePoint infrastructure. And I just want to quote that word once again. It is the SharePoint infrastructure. Okay, you're not the one who's going to take care about the Hyper-V machines, about the underlying hardware, what kind of RAM it is using, on which data center is sitting. All those things, everything will be taken care by Microsoft. But of course, you would be planning. You are the one who will be deciding about when to patch the environment, when I'm going to push the service pack, all those things. So you as a SharePoint professional would be deciding that and would be doing that. Okay. And the one which I mentioned on red lines, which says SharePoint on IaaS is not SharePoint in the cloud. Once again, a common mispractice within the industry. Okay. I believe a couple of days I was interviewing a guy. I asked him, what is SharePoint hybrid? So he said, if I'm running SharePoint between SharePoint on-premises as well as Azure, it's called a SharePoint hybrid. Totally wrong. Okay. And I think a lot of us live with this this misconception of trying to understand what SharePoint hybrid is all about. Okay. SharePoint hybrid is nothing but it is the length between the on-premises version of SharePoint and SharePoint online. It's as simple as that. Okay. Doesn't mean that if you're having SharePoint hosted on a data center and you have SharePoint hosted on Azure, it doesn't mean that you're running hybrid, period. Okay. Because be it on your data center or be it on Azure, you're still running the server version of SharePoint. Okay, you're not running anything else, and it's no way possible that you can call that as hybrid. It's just that you are hosting it on Azure so that you can reduce a lot of manual effort and unwanted manpower. That doesn't really qualify that you can call it as hybrid. So the second takeaway for this session, if you had learned anything today, please stop saying that SharePoint hybrid means you're running SharePoint on premises on your data center as well as in Azure. That's not how it is. Okay. And here, focus on application instead of data center and infrastructure. That's exactly what I spoke about a few minutes back. So you'll be focusing on SharePoint. You'll be focusing about when to patch it, when to apply the hot fixes, when to apply cumulative updates, all those kind of stuff. But you just don't need to bother about the data center. You don't need to bother about the infrastructure. You don't need to bother about the RAM, CPU. None of those. Everything will be taken care by Microsoft. And customizations are not limited. Okay, so whatever customizations you're doing on your on-premises SharePoint farm, you could very well go ahead and do it. Of course, the farm solutions is supported here because you're running a server version of SharePoint here. And this was the last point, which says this was announced in Microsoft Ignite this year. That is a very good session on how to implement SharePoint on Azure. So I would urge you all, please go ahead and take a look at it if you're planning to implement SharePoint on Azure. Okay, so 80% of marketplace deployments which is done on Azure till date is SharePoint. Okay, that was announced by Microsoft because most of their customers who are coming towards Azure, right, the kind of deployment they do on marketplaces is made only on SharePoint. The architectural tasks. Okay, I don't want to stress once again and speak about the on-premises because whatever is true for on-premises version of SharePoint holds true for the SharePoint IaaS as well. The only difference is the kind of networking stuff which you need to take care, so that your users from on premises who are sitting on AD get to access a SharePoint which is hosted on Azure. Okay, you need to take care of the subnets, the DNS, the addressing, and all those kind of stuff, and also the domain, because you're sitting on a domain which is within your jurisdiction and the SharePoint is hosted on Azure. Okay, so how would you integrate both these domains? How would you go about it? So that is something which you need to plan. And of course the DNS and Active Directory, the available sets and storage accounts. Okay, what kind of storage you would plan and what kind of SQL server you want to implement on Azure. So all those things has to be taken care by you. Choose the right virtual machine. So in Azure you have these A series, D series, E series, and all those kind of stuff, right? So you need to choose. Let's say you're having a production farm, right? Let's say we are speaking about 10,000 users. You need to make sure that you're choosing the right virtual machine. Okay, you can't choose a poor virtual machine just because the cost is low and implement SharePoint on it, and you're not going to get the best out of it. Okay, so make sure that you're choosing the right virtual machine for your end users. Okay, the load balancers, make sure that you're choosing the right load balancer for your customers. So, and design the disaster recovery environment. So the main reason why any company would move to Azure is to make sure that they have a DR farm. Okay, they would have, most of the companies, if you have seen till date, they would have their production on premises in a data center which is within their jurisdiction which they maintain. At the same point of time, a DR will be hosted on Azure. If something goes wrong here, they do not want to implement money on building another secondary location data center, and because of course they still need to take care of both the environments, right? Still that's a different data center altogether. You need to care about the CPUs, RAMs, and all those kind of stuff. Now if it is hosted on Azure, you just don't need to bother about it. Okay, you just can have the contents there, everything is there, the subnet mapping, everything is done, and once this goes down, you can bring that, you can just bring that up and have that for your end users. So choosing the Active Directory domain type for Azure, as I already said, right? So let's say you are planning for a public facing SharePoint internet site. Okay, so public facing internet site, I'm sorry. So in that case, you could have a dedicated domain. So what I mean by this is you could have your users account sitting on Azure AD alone. Okay, so users account will be on Azure AD. You can give them, what, this is your account to access SharePoint. SharePoint is sitting on Azure, so use this account to access SharePoint. And that may not be the same account which they use to log into their PCs. That may not be their normal Active Directory account. Those will be two different accounts altogether. Just because SharePoint is hosted on Azure and you do not want to integrate your domain in such a way that it talks to Azure. Okay, in that case, you could have a separate isolated domain altogether. And the next option is extending your on-premises domain through cross-premises connection. So this is the common model which we plan, the common model which is seen in the industry. You have your accounts in Active Directory on-premises, and you have the SharePoint sitting on Azure, and you want to make sure that both of them are integrated. In that case, you need to make sure that you're extending your on-premises domains towards the cloud so that users get to access it. And when to choose this model, okay? As I already spoke about, when you want to have public facing sites, you go about choosing Azure, and mostly for dev, test, and staging environments. So what I mean by this, okay, as you're all aware, SharePoint, Azure works as pay as you go. Okay, so let's say today you spin up your VMs, you open your SharePoint farm which is on Azure. Okay, you use it for 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever, and you shut it down. Maybe down the line after 2 to 3 weeks, then you again open, you just turned on the VMs, you opened the SharePoint farm, you did all those stuff. In that case, you're just going to pay Microsoft for that 1 and 2 hours you use. That's only about it. You're just not going to pay anything else, because the way it works is pay as you go. You get to pay only for what you use. And it totally makes sense to have your dev, test, and staging environments in that kind of scenario, right? In that kind of a setup. Your production environment has to be kept alive because it's production. Your users are using it, your users are accessing it, but that's not the case for dev, test, or staging, right? Hardly the SharePoint developers or farm administrators or some business users who want to test their applications would be using the dev, test, and staging. So in that case, it makes quite sense to have your SharePoint farm on Azure so that you just don't need to pay extra licenses unnecessarily. Okay. And to create a DR farm, this is something which I spoke about before. Okay, you could have a DR farm running on Azure. And the other thing which I want to clarify here about DR is, right, as long as SharePoint DR is concerned, there are two ways. You could either have a stretched SharePoint farm, or you could have a DR farm separately altogether. So what I mean by a stretched farm, let's say your SharePoint farm has some 10 servers. Okay, it has 3 WFEs, it has some app servers, it has a SQL backend and all those things. It is quite possible for you to have among the three or four web front-end servers, you could have two web front-end servers on one data center and two web front-end servers on other data center. Similar way for app server, you could have two app servers on one data center and two app servers on a different data center. So this kind of setup is called as a stretched farm. The entire logical is same, it's still a single SharePoint farm, but in case something happens to the primary data center, still you have the web front end app and all those things on a different farm to serve user requests. Your SharePoint is not going to be dead, your SharePoint is still alive. But there are some pitfalls for this kind of a model because the SharePoint config is same. Something goes wrong with your SharePoint configuration database or something, you're totally dead, right? If something, let's say a service application is totally dead, though you have redundancy because it's the application server is hosted on a different data center, but still what if the entire service application itself is dead? You can't do anything. So in that case, it makes sense to have a DR on a secondary location. There are still some companies. I'm supporting a customer who has a stretched farm, but I already spoke a lot about to the customer saying this is just not gonna help us achieve our goal, right? There are quite some possibilities that wherein what if a service application itself dies? What if something happens with the SharePoint config database? But still we are just planning to implement SharePoint on a different data center, a DR farm. But if you're planning for a DR farm, make sure that stretched farm is not just the right approach, okay? It is okay to have one, but it has its own pitfalls. And then if using cloud is the right approach for your business, yeah, you could very well go ahead, because even though it is Microsoft Azure, still your content is going to live within a Azure data center, which is taken care by Microsoft. Still you're not in control of your content, okay? So this is similar to what you see on SharePoint Online. Though you have a certain control about the SharePoint on-premises thing, they see you all those kind of things, still the content is not within you, okay? The content is sitting there. And SharePoint solutions, let's say these the normal applications or solutions, you could have this hosted on Azure and you can use them for for SharePoint Online sites as well as for SharePoint on premises. You can host your apps in Azure and then you can use them for SharePoint Online as well as for SharePoint on premises. And when not to choose this model, okay? A wrong misconception once again within the industry is trying to say that Azure is cheap. I understand it is cheap. I mean, it's not going to cost you as much as on premises. Point taken. I totally go with you. But you need to make sure that you understand, you need to make sure that you're implementing your SharePoint farm in Azure in the right approach. Okay. A common mistake, even a small mistake, could cost you a fortune, and you could know that could put your entire business on risk. Let's say you as a guy who are using Azure, you're using a SharePoint farm which is on Azure. Today you plan to deploy something and you were caught up with some other work and you're just least bothered about it. You didn't even think about that is on Azure. For the entire time that SharePoint farm is on, whatever it is, you have to pay Microsoft. Microsoft just doesn't care about whether you use something there, whether you did some deployment, Microsoft doesn't bother about it. The moment that the farm is up, Microsoft is going to start charging you. That's the way it works. So make sure that you understand what Azure is all about. So without doing enough research, without talking to Microsoft consultants with the Azure team, let's say you want to implement Azure, make sure that you have a support ticket open, right? You can reach out to Microsoft Support Center. You can have a ticket open with them. You can talk about what is your needs and they'll certainly help you understand it. And without doing enough research on Azure, please don't go ahead, okay? It could cost you a fortune if it is wrongly implemented. And when you prefer to have complete control of the entire environment. So to be more precise, what I'm trying to say by environment here is just the SharePoint environment, okay? I'm not talking about the data centers or the servers. That is still be taken care by Microsoft. You as a SharePoint guy had to be bothered about only the SharePoint on-premises environment. And when you do not have proper network, once again, because this is something which is hosted on the cloud, you need to make sure that you have proper network bandwidth. Without that, it's quite not possible for you to access something which is sitting on the cloud. And till date, SQL Pass, okay, SQL Pass is nothing but database as a service in cloud, okay. So you cannot, SharePoint doesn't support that. A couple of weeks back, I had a customer who was looking for SQL Pass for SharePoint, okay. We reached out to Microsoft. We asked them, so you know what, we have SQL infrastructure as a service for SharePoint, and it's costing us a lot. So we are thinking of going ahead with SQL Pass. So could you just help us understand whether SharePoint supports it? And the answer was no, because even in till 2016 version of SharePoint, SQL Pass is not supported. So these are the licensing requirements for the Azure. You need to have Azure subscription, okay, because you're using Azure, and then obviously you need to take care of the SharePoint server licenses as well as the SharePoint 2013 licenses. So I'm done with all the four models. Okay, that's all about the technical stuff which we talked about, and these are the responsibilities that you need to be mindful of in each model. Okay, that is a picture there from Microsoft TechNet, which clearly decides, which clearly explains about what are the things that you need to be mindful of. Okay, as you can clearly see, the blue one says that you are the customer and this is what Microsoft will take care of. Let's take about a couple of things. Okay, so let's take about the network control. When you're using SharePoint Online, Microsoft is going to take care of it. Hybrid, Microsoft is going to do part of your business, and you as the customer have to do part of your business. Okay, and when you're using Azure, right, the entire network control will be taken care by Microsoft. It just taken care by you. I'm sorry. And in kind of on-premises deployment, the entire network control has to be taken care by you. Speaking about operating system, right? So this is how it is. So physical host. So you can just correlate these things and try to understand what are the things that you need to be mindful of and what are the things which Microsoft can do for you. So make sure that you understand everything in this before you're choosing any model. So these are some survey results about all these four models. Okay, these are the survey results which was conducted by Microsoft on their customers, just to make sure that they understand which customer is still using SharePoint Online, which customer is still using on-premises, and which customer is running hybrid. Okay, so in 2013, according to Gartner, it was said that in next 6 to 8 years, this is how it should look like. Okay, 35% of existing SharePoint customers will never move to cloud. Maybe they are a bank, or maybe they are some pharmaceutical company, or maybe they are very much concerned about their data and they just do not want their data to be sitting on cloud. And 15% will become pure cloud customers, because maybe there are some startup companies, or maybe they feel that it's okay for them to move towards cloud because they just do not want to invest their time on any manual effort. And 50% will adopt a hybrid SharePoint platform, because they want to get the features of both SharePoint Online as well as SharePoint Hybrid. So 50% is what the survey results said as of 2013. Okay, so exactly the very next year, on 2014, a senior Microsoft leader announced this in a press conference. Okay, so the entire percentage changed. So 15 to 20% of existing SharePoint customers will never move to cloud. Okay, earlier it was 35%, and then it dropped down to 15 to 20%, which they said, okay, we are not going to move to cloud. We are happy with what we are, and we decide to go with on-premises version. Okay, and 10% will become purely cloud customers, because those 10% customers are happy with SharePoint Online. They're happy with the features which they get. They just do not want to spend too much of time in unwanted stuff. Okay? And 70 to 75% will adopt a hybrid SharePoint platform, which means all these customers, they have on-premises as well as online, and they want to run hybrid so that they get to enjoy both. And till date, so guys, as you all are aware, till date, most of the SharePoint customers are on premises. Though the percentage varies, most of our SharePoint customers are still on premises. Maybe they are working on migrating towards Office 365, or maybe they are working on having a hybrid environment, but till date, most of the SharePoint adoption in the world is on premises. And in this year, in 2016, it was clearly announced that moving further, Microsoft, Office 365 will be the main focus for SharePoint. Okay, that is one way for Microsoft to push us towards Office 365, but it was clearly made evident that Office 365 will be the future for SharePoint. So please reach out to your business. Please make sure that they understand the importance of Office 365. Please reach out to your customers or your business partners and make sure that we are looking forward towards Office 365. Okay. And these are some pretty cool survey results which I grabbed from the internet, so that we get to understand where Office 365 stands till now. Okay, so this is the platform growth. So enterprise users who are active in Office 365, this is the percentage. This is as of Q2 2016, right? I believe we are on Q4 now. So till Q2 2016 quarter 2, this is how it looked like. So companies and the enterprise users who are active in Office 365 is up to this percentage, and companies with 100 plus Office 365 users is on this percentage. Consumption by application and industry. So what are the top used features in Office 365. Okay, Office 365 has Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Skype for Business, Yammer. I could just keep going on and on and on. It has so many features, right? The most used feature within Office 365 is OneDrive for Business. I wouldn't really be surprised myself that 79% of folks are using OneDrive for Business because you get 1 terabyte of storage for a single user. That is something which is not possible, right? So, and that is pretty basic in every plan. Whatever plan you subscribe for in Office 365, you get OneDrive for Business. And the next most used is Exchange Online, because we all know how complex Exchange is, right? In order to have Exchange on premises implemented and in order to maintain it, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I think most of the companies decided to move it towards Exchange Online. And then we have Skype for Business, which takes care of, which was Link before, which takes care of all your meeting, broadcasting, IM chats, and all those things. And SharePoint comes next to all these things. I mean, it's not quite it's not quite cool to see SharePoint being there, but still, as I already represented in my previous slide, most of our SharePoint customers are still on premises, and it's just 35% of consumption in Office 365, which is made on SharePoint Online. And of course, we have Yammer. Okay, and usage by industry. So this is how the industry has used SharePoint Office 365 till date. So I've given what are the industries which are using SharePoint till date. It could be financial, food products, and all those kind of stuff. So this gives you a clear picture of which industry is using SharePoint Online and what kind of what kind of features they are using in Office 365. Right? You could always see SharePoint Exchange and OneDrive for Business taking a large number of percentage, and that's not the same way when it comes to SharePoint Online. And finally, we are about to conclude. So the conclusion, which from the entire session, the point which I'm trying to make is, it doesn't really matter what kind of model you're choosing for your business. Okay, SharePoint is still going to give the same set of capabilities. The only difference where it makes is whether your users are okay, whether your business is okay in moving towards cloud. You're going to set the same rich capabilities. You're going to get the same rich features. Maybe there could be certain differences, right? Say for instance, you just couldn't have farm solutions in SharePoint Online. I think stuff like Power Pivot and Word Automation Service is not possible in SharePoint Online. But apart from that, you're going to get everything. So SharePoint is going to behave the same way no matter wherever you use it. It's just about the data security which we are talking about here. And the main difference is which IT responsibilities you own and for which you pay to Microsoft. And there was a slide where I clearly showed you like what are the ones which you would be mindful of and what are the things which Microsoft will be taking care of. And it's very important as a SharePoint professional that you get to understand your business properly. Like when you have customers from different practice, right? Maybe they are not technical people, but still we need to make sure that we're understanding their business so that we choose the right model. And cloud is not an option, guys. It is a necessity these days. Okay, you just can't ignore cloud. You just can't keep saying no to cloud for a quite amount of time. Okay, most of the big companies, being IBM or Microsoft or whatever it is, right? You could see them showing a lot of focus towards Exchange. I'm sorry, towards cloud, and you just can't say no towards it. You have to adopt it. Maybe not now. In the near future, you have to go towards it. So it is not an option. It is a necessity. You make sure that you understand that. Okay. And as always and always and always, I keep saying this to my peers, to my seniors, to my customers, that SharePoint is just not meant for enterprise content management and collaboration. It is something which could make wonders if you really know how to use it and you really build it in such a manner. It's just not meant for that, right? If you just want to have content management and if you just think about SharePoint as a place to just dump your documents, right? You could think about a file server. You just don't want to invest on SharePoint for that, right? If you want to get the most out of SharePoint, you make sure that you understand what SharePoint is all about so that it's a platform which could make wonders happen. And thank you so much for watching my webinar today. And I hope you gain some good insights for yourself. And if you have any questions, I have some 10 minutes left. So in case you have any questions, anything which you want to ask me, so please feel free to put that in the chat window. I'll certainly answer that. So are we looking for any questions? So in case you don't have any questions right now and you wish to talk to me later, you guys know where to find me. So please drop me mail, or please give me a buzz, or whatever you feel like, and I'll certainly answer your questions. Yeah, who's this? Yeah, tell me.
Actually, I was just and can you please share the PPT?
Yeah, I'll make sure that this PPT is available in SlideShare. Okay, I'll post this on SlideShare so that you can go ahead and download it. I'll do that.
So can you mail the PPT?
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely do it. Yeah, you can just give me a buzz on Facebook or whatever. I'll give it to you.
Should I send my mail ID right now in chat?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that offline for you if you know where you can find me on Facebook, or you can just, some other members in this chat, right? In this, the participants would be aware of my phone number. You can just certainly reach out to them. And I got your email address. I'll send this.
No, I'll send my mail address. You
Sure,
can
sure,
mail me, okay?
sure. I'll email it to
With
you
the
then.
contact details and everything.
Yeah, definitely will do so. And I hope you all gained some good insights today. Okay, so I'll certainly come up with my next session shortly. I'm working on it. So I'll come up with a better topic so that you get to understand more about SharePoint. And I hope you all enjoyed my session, and thanks for being here, and have a good rest of the day and a nice weekend. Thank you.
Not a good issue.
Yeah, thank you.